Hello, everybody. This is Jake Stenziano, host of the Wheelbarrow Profits Podcast, here with my co-host, the multifamily mentor, the coach, the chef, the father of six, the best-selling author, the G-Daddy, Gino Barbaro. Gino, how's it going?
Making it happen, Stenziano. How we doing, bro?
Stealing my line. Doing great, man. Today's guest is Steve Goldman. Steve is the founder and principal broker of Goldman Partners Realty here in Knoxville. His specialty is multifamily properties, and today he's going to share his knowledge on networking with brokers and how to land your first deal. So without further ado, Steve, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
Hey, Steve.
Hi, Gino.
Happy to have you, and let's get this thing started. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in real estate.
Well, sure. I grew up in a family that was doing real estate. My dad was an public accountant that got into investing for his clients and started syndicating and doing literally hundreds of millions of dollars of deals all over the country, mobile home parks and that sort of thing. He had me go into running one of his factories, which brought me from Chicago to Tennessee in 1988. And after the Chinese figured out they could do what we were doing as well, I switched careers about 15 years ago and went into commercial real estate as a broker, also looking for some of my own deals, but mostly as a broker.
So why real estate? Why commercial real estate specifically?
Well, I certainly looked at both residential and commercial, as well as mortgage brokerage, to figure out what I was going to do in what was at that point really my third career of my life. My first career was in my passion of horticulture and landscape design. That's what I went to school for, but ran a factory for 15 years and ran 24/7, and some weeks, some years, 100 to 150 employees. So I've had a varied career that spanned a lot of real practical businesses. I had my own landscape contracting firm in the first career, the factory in the second, and then real estate brokerage in the third. And part of what led me to real estate is I felt like it was going to be a category where I could make, frankly, a very good income through and be compensated for my efforts. If my efforts were successful and profitable, then I would be, much more so than just having a job.
Can you talk about the landscape back then when you first started as opposed to how it is now?
Oh,
Not the landscape business.
That confused me for a second. Well, I came into this business in just before the crash, so we had a few good years where I had to cut my teeth, but it was a good time to cut my teeth on a time when things were still happening. And then I lived through the crash and the horrible days when you couldn't close a deal hardly at all, though we worked just an insane number of hours to get what deals we could, and I financially survived. The market's been back for years, especially in multifamily. Multifamily, as your viewers might know, was the very first property type to fully recover from the recession. And so because I had picked that specialty in 2007, and it really started to take off over the next couple of years, I was able to do deals throughout the recession, and it was a great choice, and it still is a very good choice.
Why do you think that is? Do you have any ideas or any assumptions?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty simple in a way. If you've got a 4-tenant or a grocery-anchored tenant shopping center and you lose a tenant, it's a really big deal. If you're in the multifamily business, losing one tenant is not that big a deal because you've got multiple tenants. By the way, we're getting a thunder and lightning storm here.
I can hear it on my end too.
So if I lose you, I'm sorry. Let me turn off my phone here. When the rents need to increase or the rents need to decrease in multifamily, you get roughly 1/12 of your tenants, one every month, 1/12 of your tenants being able to reprice each month to react to the market. If you've got a strip center, for example, you've got typically 5 to 10-year leases for each tenant. Well, you can't make the adjustments very fast. The tenants might say that they're going to close and break their lease, but as the landlord, you can't do that on the landlord side. So multifamily is much more flexible, up or down, and for years, actually, it's been going up. Rents have been increasing beautifully.
So could you remember your first deal and what you learned on that first deal?
Well, first deal was some very small retail lease, and it's hard to even remember the details of it. Other than that, we just gave it my all. And one thing I can share is that throughout the years I've been doing this, I've approached every single deal almost identically. Whether it's literally going to get $1,000 commission or $100,000 commission, I don't really approach it differently other than behaving the way that particular client needs me to behave. The smaller deals are almost always much harder to do than the bigger deals because the bigger deals are usually more experienced, sophisticated buyers and sellers. And the smaller deals, they tend to need a lot more hand holding, and I can act either way, do whatever needs to be done to get the deal done.
Which is great, which is what I like, because when me and Jake first started out, we needed a little hand holding, right, Jake? And
A lot of hand holding.
if we didn't have that broker to hand hold, and if you don't have the vision to see that actually client to get bigger, then you're going to lose a lot of those deals. And that's one of the gripes that I have with real estate brokers and mortgage brokers. They always look down upon little deals, and I'm glad you said you don't, because that's where your big deals come out of. Little deals grow into big deals. So I think that's really important to have to point that out.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, you don't know who's going to be your best client a year from then or 5 years from then. Multifamily, like so many other real estate investment segments, people tend to buy a small thing. It's only logical because that's all they can afford, and might be a duplex or a fourplex. But as you guys have experienced yourselves, very quickly you start leveraging those properties and refinancing them and buying a bigger and bigger property, and you figure out you can make a lot more cash flow on bigger properties, and so they tend to sell the duplex and fourplexes and then go into the bigger properties, and it's awesome because the broker, if he's done a good job and has earned the respect of both the investor as well as the lenders involved, then he's going to get to both sell the old property and broker and find the new property. And we've done that countless times.
That's awesome. What qualities do you think make up a successful broker?
Well, we've certainly experienced all types. One of the family things we would say is that there's awesome bankers that you need to respect and follow, and there's lazy and not very bright bankers. And the same thing is absolutely true in every profession. There's bad doctors and good doctors, and boy, is that true in brokerage. The bar to become a doctor or an attorney is pretty high. A lot of people don't ever get that far, but the bar for getting a license is pretty low. And so you get absolutely all kinds, from part-timers to people that aren't very bright to people that are very bright. And so what makes a successful broker is to be adequately bright, to know your business and your property category. Other qualities include just extreme honesty. There's times we have to maintain confidentiality, and that shouldn't be confused with dishonesty. Honesty is when you tell your both players, the buyer and the seller, regardless of who you're working for, treat them both with respect. Share with them the information that needs to be shared without violating any rules. But if a deal is going south, then the sooner everyone gets out, the better for everybody, and they shouldn't hang on to it a long time. Honesty has always paid off, and as well as generosity. Some brokers are very generous, like us, in that we're happy to pay referral fees because that's part of the way the business works, to find out about the good deals, or to find out about get a referral to a good client. And we've got a reputation for consistently paying referral fees, sometimes even when they're not due, and that wins over people a lot. It may not be legally due, but in my mind, it's morally due. I wouldn't have had the client or the situation without their help, and when they get that check, they're pretty happy about it.
Steve, I always hammer on the show why brokers are most important team members. I always say you need to make those broker relationships. Why do you think the broker is the most important team member for a multifamily investor?
Well, of course, they're all important. Without any of the three legs, you won't get a deal done. But a bad broker can really scotch up a deal, just like a bad lawyer. We get attorneys sometimes that want to show everyone how smart they are and earn a living. And they end up changing one word or two words just to show people something. But the good lawyers look at the intent, make sure they're not leaving any traps, and get the deal done. And the same thing with the brokers. We've run into brokers who are just so pleasant to deal with, and instead of taking advantage of situations, they guided. Sometimes folks call that the kabuki language. They talk a little behind the scenes and say, look, if you just uh, think about doing this, we can get the deal done. And other
What
brokers
is this
want
kabuki? I've never heard of kabuki. What's kabuki?
yeah, you can actually Google it. A client gave us that term, and I laughed and looked it up. It's actually a real thing. It's just kind of the hidden language that people talk. Doctors use it between themselves when they're talking about a patient.
Give me an example of kabuki.
Oh, language. Well, just like I was saying a second ago, brokers might call each other and say, "Hey, that stand your client took was a bit aggressive and really not in the spirit of what we're trying to get done here. Perhaps if you would just look at it like this, or your client would look at it like this, we can get this done." Or another example is classic. Let's say a property is priced at, I'll just make up a number, $1 million, and the buyer comes in at says, well, let's see if we can get it done at 700, just some ridiculously low number. And the other broker, instead of just writing it up, the buyer's broker will take it to the listing broker and say, hey, my guy's looking to get what he can. I don't want to make your seller mad, but look, is there any, would it be okay if we submitted an offer for 700? And the other broker might say, go ahead and try. Or he might say, look, if you do that, my seller won't even work with your buyer. That's just a ridiculous number. It's, though we've all seen deals get done at ridiculously low numbers, so it's not bad for the buy side to ask. But if you've got two great brokers working properly for everyone's best interest, the two brokers can talk the kabuki language, get a little feedback, and find out whether this buyer would or wouldn't be offended by a very low offer, and that can make a world of difference.
Kabuki.
How can you add value to an investor? What are your things that you can do to add value to that investor looking to buy a property?
Sure. Well, there's lots of things. The very first thing is don't work on projects you shouldn't, and brokers violate this all the time. Just like a doctor should know what his limits are, or an attorney. I'll keep using those examples because real estate licensees are professionals. We're licensed by the state. On top of that, we've got to be smart about how we conduct ourselves. And the first is that there are places for general brokers. We call them street brokers that just sell absolutely anything, and that's fine if you've got a generic need. And nothing's going to be very complicated about the situation. I think that's fine. I was a general broker for a while, but when you get into a situation of a deal transaction that needs specialization, a doctor shouldn't work on a heart patient if he's a gastro, and a lawyer who's really good at patent law probably shouldn't be doing real estate transactions, and a broker who's really good at medical office leasing really shouldn't get involved in multifamily transactions, for example. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know the idiosyncrasies about the deal. They'll think they're being smart and logical, but if they haven't done lots of multifamily, for example, to use that, then they won't know what happens with rents received and collected after a sale, and therefore they won't know how to properly advise their clients how to deal with that, and therefore they might have a client railing about something that is just not normally done, and can scotch the deal. So a good broker who knows his specialty will be able to help a buyer through the process, giving them good advice. That's just one example. Another is that a broker who's tied in and focused on a specific property type category has his finger on the pulse, knows the pricing better than generally everyone, often even better than the appraisers, because the appraisers are backward looking, where brokers are able to be forward looking. And by being a specialist, the broker can provide advice and examples to the lender and to the appraiser, and frankly to the buyer and seller, to make sure that it's priced to market and the deal can get done. Knowing about the market, knows what's on the market. So by specializing, we maintain a list of I'll glance over at my computer on a different screen. Properties. So we've got 6,300 properties in our database, along with 17,700 contacts, many of whom, not all, are investors. And so we can categorize the properties, we can categorize the the properties and the investors for what they're looking for, and then tie the two together. By staying in touch with these owners, we're able to know when someone tells us, well, I'm not going to sell this year, but I might sell next year or in 2 years. We can flag them and come back to them in a couple of years. And that's one of the ways that we're able to get deals that are not on the market. People don't know about them, and we're able to bring them and put people together.
And that's why it's important to stay in front of a broker. Those buyers lists are massive. What do you look for in a buyer? Because the buyers are always looking at what a broker can bring to them. But what can we bring to you to show us our credibility and our ability to close a deal?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. And I'll start out by saying the negative and then move into the positive. The negative side is there's clients that we won't work with. They've just worn us out. They always make ridiculously low offers, for example, or they're just so difficult to work with. We don't need to work with that at our stage of the career. We deal with some things that are difficult, and we don't fire everybody, but there are times when a client just needs to be fired. It's just not worth the brain damage, as we say.
Who is that one we just did the podcast with? You know?
It was Garrett Sutton, a toxic client.
Toxic client.
You can be a toxic client or you can be a toxic business owner. It works both ways. But if you're at that stage in your career, at any stage in your career, you shouldn't be able to work with somebody like that because it's just not worth the hassle sometimes. I agree with you. I agree 100% with you.
And some people are literally crazy. And I don't mean that in a clinical sense. They're just so ridiculous that and it wrecks my credibility. If I bring a bad buyer to a seller, I probably won't get the attention from that seller on future deals, and it's just not worth it. So what's a good buyer, a good investor? A good investor is loyal, though that has its limits because some situations a buyer can't stay loyal or shouldn't stay loyal, but loyalty is very important. Another one is to have their credibility worked out in advance, such as having a credibility book or a deal resume. There's lots of names for the same thing. It's some format of a one or more page PDF or Excel spreadsheet listing the properties that that an investor currently or has owned in the past, so that when we bring an offer to a seller, the seller wants to go with a person who's going to get the deal closed, and knowing what experiences that buyer has in the past.
So you like to see a credibility book from your investors to know, okay, this is why I should be working with this person.
Absolutely. It depends on the deal size, not for a duplex or a fourplex, but for a significant property, when we're going to bring multiple offers, or other brokers will bring multiple offers to that seller, we want to make our investor stand out and look exceptional.
But Steve, just starting up, even if it was a 10-unit complex and someone brought to you a credibility book, and then another guy didn't, and they probably were in similar standing, wouldn't that separate the guy with the credibility book versus the guy that did not have it?
It's always a leg up.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. It's right. I'm just saying it's probably not necessary for a small first-time player.
No, totally. But it shows the level of interest and the seriousness of that buyer
and the capability.
Yep.
And if someone, my dad was a pretty strong player in his day, and he never had a problem when a broker, a listing broker, said, "Hey, I'd like to get." Confirmation of your ability to close. So this is another step. So the first one was the credibility book or deal resume. Second is the ability to show the ability to close. So an investor should have already talked with lenders, know that he's been pre-approved, should also go ahead and get some screen grabs or be ready emotionally to get some screen grabs of his current account balances were relevant. If you've got 10 accounts, but 2 of them show $1 million in each, that you only need 1 or 2 of those. Just enough to show that you've got the cash to close. Where we've had some novice investors say, no, that's private information. I'm not providing my personal financial statement. Well, the sophisticated investors know it's no problem. They're going to provide whatever document or documents are necessary to prove that they've got the capability to close without hesitation. Now, they may not want to share that with the listing broker. They may want to send it directly to the seller or the lender. There's different ways to do that if they don't want to give it to the broker. But if you're dealing with an experienced professional broker, you shouldn't hesitate to provide your very private information, confidential information to a
It's okay to peek down the pants every once in a while, right?
Well, that's an important step. If someone fights us on that, we really have to wonder why they'd want to fight us on that.
Sure.
So that's another example. Another is is to be a strong earnest money depositor. We get some offers from people who want to act like they're big time players, but they want to put $500 or $1,000 down for earnest money, and there's very few deals where that's going to impress the seller. And the idea of earnest money is to impress the seller. So when we see deals of we like to see earnest money of at least 1%. Better is to have 2%, and sometimes it goes even higher when a sophisticated buyer wants to really show that he's serious about the deal. He'll put up 2% or more earnest money, and that goes a long way for the buyer to say, "Wow, this guy is serious. I know he'll really want to close."
Steve, as far as real estate brokers, do you help out potential new investors coming to the market, building their team? Because I've found that when we first started, we had no team, but our broker in the beginning really helped us build out as far as getting a lender, an inspector. Do you help investors with that aspect also?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're pretty proud of that. We've got pre-prepared lists of by category of referrals that we give, as well as sometimes we just need to give a custom referral. For example, I'm doing a property that's coming off of tax credit. The tax credits just got used up. We're at the 15th year, so we needed to make very custom recommendations for attorneys and lenders who would understand about the LURC, which is the land use restriction covenants. Not every lender or attorney is going to understand these aspects. So you bet. In our database of 17,000, there's hundreds of literally hundreds of attorneys, each one categorized by what their specialty is, so that without having to, get all nervous and try to think of who it is, we just query our database to say, okay, who's the attorneys we've worked with that have knowledge about this specific category. And same thing with lenders. We must have 40 categories of lenders. Now, a single lender can be in multiple categories, but if we know they love doctors and medical office, then we've got them flagged for that. If they've had enough of multifamily, that bucket for them is full, then we're not going to refer to them for a while until they're ready to accept more clients in that category. And that goes for inspectors, geotech, which is the soils inspection people, plumbers. We just do an endless flow. And part of that is helps us stay in touch with the investors. Just because an investor currently today this year isn't buying or selling any properties because they're full up, they need to accumulate some more funds, for example. We want to be their go-to people. So just yesterday we got someone out of Florida that we've sold several net lease properties to, calling us to ask us about property tax submissions to the net lease company, the Dollar Generals to be exact. And I gave her a very thorough email response with all the details down to her lease, the lines and where to look in her lease about exactly where to send it and how much time she has to send in her property tax bill and what she should send them and how long it should take. Gave her phone numbers for the tenant. And again, I don't get paid to do that. The payment is in the long-term care and feeding of your investors who are going to come back to you and be very, very loyal to you.
I think that's one of the difficult things about being a realtor, real estate. A lot of the work you do, you don't get paid, and everyone just focuses on, I'm going to buy and sell a list. But there's so much that goes into creating that relationship. I find it to be almost mind-boggling talking about it now and seeing how big the list is. How long has it taken for you to accumulate that list of 17,000?
Yeah, years and years and years. And I couldn't count the nights and weekends that I've just spent going through any number of sources and Googling and whatever to make sure I log all of the contacts. So if we get a property listed in Loopnet, we get a ton of looky-loos, as we call them. Well, they're interested parties, so they're all going to go into the database, and we'll try to follow up with them and say, hey, that didn't work, but what are you looking for? Capture their criteria and accumulate them in the database.
And I know you're so super successful because when I go on Loopnet, that's one of the parameters I tell all investors. Go on Loopnet, see who's listing the properties. And you guys always have multiple properties on Loopnet. You're one of the top brokers, and that's what makes you one of the top brokers because you're always thinking about servicing the investor. It's not just about the commission. It's about that long-term relationship. I think that's the most important thing.
I can't overemphasize that enough. As we get additional agents who want to come to our office, we tell them you better have 3 to 4 months of cash accumulated in your savings account, because there may not be a check for, we've had people go a year, not at my firm, but at other firms and other firms I've been at. It's a very slow process. And if you're too aggressive and too greedy, just thinking about the dollar, you're not going to be a very good broker. You're not going to be develop the respect in the client list, because they have to know that you're actually out looking for their best interest and not just trying to make a buck. The buck follows. It's an amazing part of the business.
Before we get into networking, I want to ask you, what have you seen over the past 5 years in the market? How has multifamily accelerated? How have things just pricing going up, cap rates going down? What is your view of the market over the last 5 years?
Well, it's been a wonderful market. All the articles that are coming up that I see online or in the magazines I get are saying, how long can it last? Can the multifamily boom last? Will it continue? And I don't know that anyone knows the answers. For several years now, we've had the perfect storm of positive. Maybe storm isn't the right term. Perfect confluence of factors that make it both a great time for buyers and sellers. Is it a seller's market? Absolutely. The prices are up, so it's a great time to sell your property. Occupancies are up, so you get the highest price, plus you're making the most money, which are the two are related. But it's also a fantastic time to be a buyer because interest rates are so low. So if you buy, as far as we can see, the rents are going to continue to increase, which means your returns and IRR should continue to be excellent. So, and there's almost always opportunities. So many tens of thousands of multifamily properties all across the country that there's always some that have been neglected for any number of reasons, and so they need repair and there's upside potential. Others are still being transacted because even if they're great properties, people are looking for the cash flow and not necessarily the value add play. So the market's just been terrific because of the low interest rates and the ready availability of loans, of equity. And of course, there's a lot of people looking to become partners in properties, so that's another source of equity.
Jake and I met you at a networking event at an REI club meeting. I was so fortunate that I went down. We did a presentation. What tips do you have on networking for real estate investors?
Well, everyone's got a different style. My particular style is not as social as other people's, and they might be extremely successful by being more social. I tend to be wore out after my day and like to go home and relax, where other people like to go out into evening meetings at different events and chamber events, and I would recommend that to anybody, especially when they're getting started. Fortunately, my business partner John Dempster and I are at the stage where we know a lot of people and we get a pretty constant flow of new business, but people needing new business should always network and frankly just about every possible way. So the Knox RIA meetings or any RIA meetings are a good source. Anytime you can get in front of people that are investors. But also, we do put a lot of effort to meet with lenders every single week. So I guess that's being sociable. And we attend the CCIM.
Are you the antisocial broker? Is that what I'm hearing, Steve?
I just get tired. But we do always make time for lenders because lenders know investors. The lenders want to lend. We want to make a sale, so these are the people that are going to put things together. Lenders are going to bring us investors, or they might even know someone who's looking to sell. In my early years, one of the first things I did is I went over to the Family Investment Center, which is just a funny word for the office that gives out the voucher programs, and made an appointment. The woman operating it all those years ago is still operating it, and she said, "Why do you want to meet?" I said, "I just want to talk about the market." And in the course of a relatively short conversation, it probably wasn't more than 20 minutes, I asked, "Do you know of any owners who might be interested in selling their properties that are subsidized voucher, kind of properties?" And she gave me only one name. She was afraid to give out a long list, and that guy instantly became one of my best clients. We've made just I've made him millions of dollars, and he's done very well for me, obviously, on the side. And it all came from making the effort to go have that one meeting that seemed a little obtuse. And of course, I've got dozens or hundreds of meetings that didn't result in anything, but you never know. So we spend our time going to those kinds of meetings and talking to people, and we send out literally, as you guys might know, thousands of emails a week, probably in the area of 5,000 emails a week, to lists of people who want to subscribe and could easily unsubscribe if they didn't want to. And we do things like postcards and mailings to owners of properties. We put ourselves in front of as many people as we can, and those lists aren't just current owners. They're current owners as well as past investors or prospects who have contacted us. We also include on our lists referral sources, as I call them, people who can give us referrals to buyers or sellers. So they go to home inspectors of every kind, commercial and home. They go to lenders, hundreds and hundreds of lenders and attorneys, though we're careful about who we don't want to make anybody mad, and they can easily unsubscribe, but we include all these referral sources in there.
What is the best real estate advice tip that you can give to the listeners right now? Best one, or one of the best?
What's one of the best? I think one of the single most important things is a clear communication and regular and open communication. We look for people who are honest with us and tell us really what they've got in mind. That helps us get the deals done. We look for people who return calls. Oh my goodness, there's so many brokers that are listing a property that won't return a call. It's just
they
mind-blowing.
don't love you. They don't want to share commission with you. That's why.
That could be part of it. Or they're just overwhelmed with work, but then they need to let loose of some of their money and hire an assistant or bring on an additional team member. Single advice, I don't know. Be open-minded and listen, ask questions. I call experts for advice. That's the way I was trained by my dad. I don't know if he was 60 and 70s. He was still calling people for advice. You don't know everything. I don't care how long you've been in the business. So when I'm working on something new and I'm just not sure I know, then I pick up the phone and just ask for advice. I get terrific advice from people I've met over time, and they appreciate being asked. So investors, ask your broker for advice and see if they're knowledgeable enough to be able to answer it.
Guys, do as you say and say as you do. If you're going to send an LOI, send the LOI over. Don't waste Steve's time because he's got really busy with other clients and you want to perform. Don't do what you say you're going to do. That's the takeaway that I get from the whole thing. Right, Jake?
Absolutely. Hey, guys, let's take a quick commercial break.
Are you stuck on the sidelines experiencing analysis by paralysis? Are you still trying to get your first multifamily deal done? We've never met an investor who's only done one deal. People are either stuck on the sidelines or they've done multiple deals. We always say that it's education times action that equal results. You've come to the education side of the equation. Let us help you land your first deal. Call Jake and Gino today at 904-314-9473 to set up a strategy session or email us at gino@jakeandgino.com.
Woo! Love that guy. Now back to the show. So, Steve, any other advice on someone networking with a broker on their first deal? Because I think this is a lot of what the listeners want to hear. Anything else that you want to say or mention to the listeners to say, this is what we're really looking for. This is something that stood out to me that someone should really do when networking with a broker on their first deal. I know we talked about the credibility book. We talked about following up. Is there anything else that you can, maybe shed light on that is a good tip for the listeners?
Try to get a sense of your criteria for making an investment. The more clear you are with the broker, the less properties he'll send you that don't fit your criteria.
So if you're looking for 10 units or a certain dollar amount, be specific and say, this is what we're looking for, right?
Yeah, minimum and maximum number of units or dollar amount that you can invest. If you're going to be looking for seller financing and aren't able to or willing to go to a commercial lender, tell them that in the first call. Because the broker needs to know that. He doesn't need to find that.
And it's okay. I mean, you're not going to shy away from somebody because they say they're looking for seller finance. You just may wait for the deal that that's appropriate for that.
Fair, well said. We're we're also not going to send them lots of things, right? We won't send them things that we know where the seller financing isn't an option.
Exactly.
Yeah, and be patient. As you guys know, and we've experienced together, it's sometimes you got to move really quick, and sometimes you've got to be incredibly patient. And we don't always know when that's going to happen. So there's times when I'm working on a deal right now where the buyers needed to come in quickly within a couple of days, and actually they all ended up bidding over asking price, which doesn't happen that often. But those investors that understood the game understood that, that was needed in this situation. We had to get offers in quick. And we'll get some people to say, well, you're just forcing me. That's the way people get scammed, and I can't move that fast. Well, I've got to convince people that there are circumstances when that is, in fact, what is necessary. No one's trying to scam you. And if you're not comfortable, no problem. We'll work together on the next deal, because most deals do move at a normal slow pace. But when a broker says, hey, this is happening now, and if the broker's an honest broker, you've got to move. You got to be really ready, willing, and able to move fast. Other times, it's unbelievable. You get a slow moving seller, and boy, you just have to be patient.
Steve, this is full contact, baby. You got to tell that person, get out the game if you can't handle it, right? Come on now.
Yeah. just understand that every situation is a bit unique, and you got to deal with it.
Steve's too nice. So you've been in real estate for quite a while now. What is aside from maybe being real estate specific, but more success focused? What is your best habit for success that's got you to the point that you're at today?
Sure thing. Well, and I'll preface that with that my style is going to be different than the next person's style, and I've learned that just because what worked for me doesn't work for the next person. So I'm open-minded about that. Not to be successful, you don't have to have my particular habits, but you have to find a set of habits that works for you. I know I'm not a backslapping, fun, let's go have a drink kind of a guy, but some of those guys are wildly successful. So my style is more works for me is to be extremely detailed. So I'm going to be very literal, very focused, and produce excellent numbers and good spreadsheets and help people analyze their properties. And we work with some very smart clients who don't need my help doing the analysis and spreadsheets, but they really appreciate me answering. If they send me an email with 5 questions, I actually answer all 5 questions, as opposed to so many times I'll send out 5 questions and they'll answer the top one.
Guilty of that.
I've got to go answer the next 4. I've got to ask them a second time for the next ones. So I try to be very detailed and try to be timely in my responses. I'm detailed in building the databases of properties and investors and putting it together, and that's really worked for me. One of my keys to success is from the year one, from my first couple of weeks getting licensed, I figured out intellectually that, or maybe intuitively would be the right thing to say, that I wanted a partner, that I thought approaching real estate business as a partnership was the way to go. In fact, I named my company Goldman Partners Realty. And the partners, to me, implies multiple things. I'm partnering with my seller or buyer because what does it mean to be a partner? It means to share in the upside and the downside. And if I don't sell someone's listing, then I'm not getting any money. And while they still own their property, they didn't get their proceeds. They didn't get out of the operation of the property, but I didn't get a penny either, despite my efforts and time. So we're partnering. Same thing with my teammates. So from the day I started in the business, I figured out I needed to partner with the other brokers. Those independent one-person shows, they want to keep all the commission for themselves. I understand it. It really is significant to split 50-50 with a listing partner. That's the 50% is a big reduction in the income. However, it gives better service to the clients and lets me have a life. When I go on vacation or visit my kids out of state, I don't have to be glued to my phone and iPad the whole time. And they're going to get more timely, thorough responses because I'm partnering with someone. Also, just sometimes work comes in clusters. Suddenly I'm working on 2 deals at once, or 20 deals at once, and I've got to split up the workload and make sure that the priorities are being taken care of. And I can do that a lot better working with a partner than I can trying to be a one-man show. So I think finding a broker who does that is a good move for everybody. Everybody wins when there's partners involved.
It's just you got to scale your business. You can't be doing it all yourself. So I think as a business owner, it's something you have to do. I don't even think there's an option unless you, like you said. And plus you talked about the backslapping social kind of guy. You may have partnered with people that have qualities that you don't have. So maybe you have that kind of backslapping social broker out there that takes the people out for drinks, and maybe you're more of the analytic guy. So it's having those complementary skill sets as well that I think it can make a great team.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, my partner John goes to Rotary and knows a huge number of people that I absolutely don't know. And then I've got different skills that bring to the game, and I build the lists for who both of us will call, and we'll split up the lists and get through the list very quickly. So one of the successes we've had using the database is when we get a new listing, we're going to build. I'm going to build a list of the best prospects. I do a first pass using our database to come up with hundreds of people that generally fit as being a good buyer for that particular property, a good fit. Then I'm going to break it down into two more groups. I'm going to break each of those into an A, B, or a C. Who do I think the best buyers are? And we're going to call the A's, make personal calls. We may get around to doing the B's. We'll probably never get around to contacting the C's, other than that if we post it as a public listing. So the lists are terrific. They get us to a yes as quickly as possible.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
What has been your biggest mistake in the business?
Mistake? What mistakes? Boy, I'm sure there's tons. My personal failure, and I've shared this many times, is that we've got this terrific database and we don't always just sit and call like we should to find new properties to list. Some of my competitors, whether they be younger or older than me, do a better job of that. They just sit on the phone and stay in better contact with the owners. I haven't done a good enough job at that. But I'm also the owner of the business, and I do my own bookkeeping, and maybe those are excuses.
Oh, come on, Steve! You got to scale that. Come on, sub it out. We got to hire Steve a bookkeeper here. That's our goal after this call.
Yeah. So that's probably my biggest error. Other than that, I'm proud of how I've stayed honest with people, even when it's cost me deals. I'd rather go home and be able to explain anything that's gone on to my kids rather than be embarrassed about something I've done that was just horrible.
Sure.
So I'm very comfortable with how I've handled my business, and I've got a great reputation because of that.
Very cool. What's your favorite business, investing, real estate book? Anything that's been really impactful in your career?
Well, I don't know if I can name one right off the top of my head. Sorry about that.
The Steve Goldman autobiography. No?
My dad wrote a book as he was dying from leukemia. He spent the last year of his life putting together his stories, and that's we helped edit it and get it self-published after he passed away.
What's it
we've
called?
got that. So let me glance in my office, see if I've got a copy of it around. The something like the path less taken, or something like that. Let me see if I can look it up real quick.
Gino, so while he's looking it up, what are you reading right now? Gino reads like 6 books a day, so that's what we
Wheelbarrow Profits.
Wheelbarrow Profit. I heard of that one.
No, actually, you know what? I got another book today, Jake. It's called Coactive Coaching. So I'm going more into the life coaching, personal development space. That's what I'm flying down to Tennessee on Friday. I'll be reading that on the plane, and it's all what Steve talked about. It's all about also asking questions. So when you're negotiating or you're learning about somebody, it's all about asking those empowering questions and finding out what the other side wants. It's not all about us. It's always about what the other side wants and how Steve can service the clients or how we can service. I think that's really important.
You know what the funniest thing is going to be? In the next week or two, I guarantee that you or I are going to speak to somebody and they're going to start talking about kabuki. We're definitely hearing kabuki 2 or 3 times next week. I'm telling you right now.
I drew a blank on it. Here's the book, The Road Less Traveled. See if I can get that in focus here.
Oh, cool. So for the YouTube folks out there, he's got a picture of the book. That looks nice.
Yeah, it's the road less traveled, the remarkable journey of George N. Goldman, my father. And he did have an amazing life. Both he and my mom grew up as only children and with just no money at all. And they built a fortune, not a Donald Trump level fortune, but a solid fortune. And talked about real estate deals and all the drama that they went through as they followed the paths and tried to lead their own path. And in addition, started giving away their fortune. So and they were successful with that. Both my parents are now gone, and gave away something over $9 million. And we've still left us with a foundation with a nice corpus that we're now running and donating money, mostly to medical research.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
What project are you excited about right now?
Well, we focus on three things. We're always doing multifamily of absolutely every size. We in East Tennessee for the most part. We always then are providing net lease properties for clients because it's a pretty typical transition as they eventually get tired of the 3 T's, tenants, toilets, and trash. At some point they want to sell their last properties and just take that cash and still want to make money. They don't want to put it in securities. So we have sold many Dollar General stores and auto parts stores, Family Dollar and that sort of thing. They get a nice, decent return. Dollar store 6.45% right at the moment. On an absolute net lease, there's no responsibilities whatsoever. And the tenants typically renew, but if they don't, you've still got a simple box. I personally also work on site finding for Napa Auto Parts. So at the moment, I'm rebuilding a former public library into a Napa Auto Parts store here in Knoxville, and
cool.
that's taking a lot of attention. But it's fun, and I've worked for them for years. I did 3 new construction stores for them about 10 years ago. They had about a 10-year dry spell, and now we're really gearing up to open a bunch more stores.
That's awesome.
What's the best way for listeners to get a hold of you so they can buy their next property?
Well, start by calling. We're at area code 865-444-3240. That's our main number. And we'll hook you up with the agent who's a best fit for the kinds of things you're looking for. Our website is gprknoxville.com. That's GPR like Goldman Partners Realty.
Just like that.
Yeah. Knoxville. So gprknoxville.com. And there's just a ton of information there, as well as our listings are linked from there, and you can even get to the packages from there. That's probably the 2 best methods.
Yeah, and I will, all the stuff that Steve was saying about being detailed, and we worked with him before. It's all true, and even some of the little things like because we usually timelines and things like that, performance guidelines, we'll just jot that down ourselves. But Steve will actually send out an Excel version, a PDF version of that to keep everyone on track in terms of what they have to do. So we find great value in that. So Steve's been really good, and I got to say this before we get off, so Gino doesn't get mad at me. But if you guys found value in the podcast, please go on to iTunes and give us a like and subscribe. But Steve, anything else for the listeners out there?
No, I think we've covered a wide range of things. Just be honest and open with the people you're working with, and get deals done.
Get it done. Gino, what's going on? What's up over there, man?
I wanted to mention a couple things, couple takeaways that I got away from the podcast. First thing is Steve mentioned brokers are deal makers. Attorneys are deal killers. That's what I was hearing. I was hearing the underling of that, and I can attest to that. A good broker is going to smooth the deal over. He's going to keep that open relationship between two. He's going to keep the ship moving forward, and it's the attorney's job to go through that contract and pick out little things and really stall it. But then the broker's got to come back and make that ship keep going forward. We've had problems, Jake, right, where the brokers actually just disappear, and then all of a sudden you're trying to put the deal together, and it's not you. I think Steve's main job is to be that conduit between us and the other side and try to make everything coalesce and come together. So that's what brokers are really. I think that separates the good broker from the great broker.
Very cool, guys. It's been real. Till next time.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. See ya.